Today we're going to compare this cheap Westfield Les Paul with this more expensive Gibson Les Paul. Now this is not some clickbait video where I'm telling you that this cheap Westfield is going to outplay this Gibson. That's just simply not true. The Gibson is the better guitar. This is more of a comparison to let you see the main differences between a sort of $200 guitar versus something like this in the region of $2,000. We'll get them both on the bench right now, strip them down, I'll show you the main differences, and then we'll do a sound demo at the end. So we'll start with the Westfield. Of these kitchen scales, let's see if we can get an idea of weight with them. Just a generic bridge and stop bar tailpiece. Chrome plated, obviously some sort of cast. So of course scale length is just the same as a Gibson, pretty much 24 and 3/4 inch. The nut width is 44 millimeters. The nut on this one is a plastic nut, and to be honest, it's cut pretty decent. You know, like I said, the action was pretty low, and you know there was no issues with it. So truss rod is just a hex nut inside the neck cavity. Plenty of space there to adjust it. So the neck profile on this one is, you know, I've never been great at determining neck profiles, if I'm honest. This one is, it's not too chunky, but it's not super thin. It's like a modern profile. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very similar to the Gibson profile. There's not much different there, nothing special about it. I've mentioned it in previous videos, my favorite neck profile is either a really slim Ibanez style neck, like a slim D, or a quite pronounced V, like you would get on some of those photo flame Japanese Fenders that were coming out during the 90s. Anyway, the frets on this Westfield are super thin, very, very thin, narrow frets. Quite tall. Of course it's got a bound fingerboard, but no fret nibs on the ends. It does have the single binding across the top of the body as well, and a bound headstock. No markings in the neck pickup, just a generic pickup. Same as the bridge, both of them have plastic still on the bottoms of them. So of course with the pickups out of their cavities we can have a better look at the body construction. It is difficult to see with these here, but it looks like it's a hollow top in that the actual top that's glued onto this is arched. So rather than it being like a carved top to get this, you know, classic Les Paul shape, it does seem to be arched with a cavity between this and the body. Now I think, trying to remember Trogley's videos, someone can correct me on this, but I think some of the 70s Gibsons were made this way. But yeah, the top to me looks like a plywood top with this veneer. It might be a two-piece body, like a sandwich body. I think I initially said it wasn't a sandwich However, I think most of that sandwich is hidden because by the time it gets to the edges here, it tapers off, if that makes sense. So the sandwich is on the high parts and then you don't see it come the side. Hopefully that translates on camera and what I'm saying makes sense, but yeah, I think we've got a plywood top with a veneer. It is hollow to create this arch, and it does seem to be a little bit of a sandwich going on, maybe just in this middle bit to give that raised connection. I have no idea what wood the main body construction is. We know it's got the big knot on the side that I showed earlier. Fairly standard 2-volume, 2-tone. Pretty normal for a Les Paul style guitar. I think you could do a lot without spending very much by upgrading the pots here. And yeah, maybe some better capacitors on it, things like that there, because although I don't know, these do look very cheap. All right, so this is the bridge. So about 9.2. Middle 4.56. And the neck is around a 9. Fretboard material is pretty much anyone's best guess, but it, you know, obviously looks like a rosewood or some kind of rosewood alternative. Obviously white trapezoid style inlays. They look like some sort of white plastic. They actually look like resin. I don't imagine them pouring resin into this, to be honest, but that's just what they look like. So you can see the neck joint here. I'm not sure this even has a tenon. I think it's just glued on. Very similar to how a bolt-on neck would actually be attached, just with this extra heel bit. And the tuners are just these generic Chinese-made, very cheap tuners. They feel okay, you know, they're still stiff enough, but certainly nothing special. Given the idea behind this is that we compare a $200 versus a $2,000 guitar exactly as is, as we bought them. The condition is probably important. Obviously that'll vary massively for anyone else who buys one, because you're not going to be buying this guitar. However, it's an idea of the market anyway. So in terms of this one, this Westfield, if I was to score the condition out of 10, I would probably give it a 6. There's no major chips out of it. There's a couple of little paint chips along, you know, the back of the neck here, scratches along here, some scratches on the back, little bit of a chip here on the side, but nothing major, nothing, no serious damage, just cosmetic. The neck is perfectly straight. It played pretty good, just needed a little bit of an adjustment, I think. Apart from the switch, which was obviously broken and has been repaired, I guess with this switch we would score it a little bit lower. But honestly, you know, I didn't buy it for $200. It was £120. I think that was like $168 or something like that there. Say $170. So I think for that kind of price range, if you can get something like this, 100%, it's a good buy. But let's see the main differences between this and the Gibson. On to the Gibson now. If you don't know, this is a 2012 Gibson Les Paul Traditional. It came with a hard case, which is obviously a big bonus. This one cost me £1,250. Now, they're priced anywhere from kind of 1,500 upwards to around 2. If you can get one for around that 1,200 mark, I think it's a good deal. And I know I'm saying that this is $200 versus $2,000. I'm just kind of targeting, you know, the bulk of my audience, which is the US. In terms of the UK and what I actually paid, I paid £120 for the Westfield. I paid £12.50 for this. So, you know, either way, this was 10 times the price of the Westfield. Just like the Westfield, the first thing I'll do is give this a little weigh. Pretty much bang on 3 kilos. 200 grams of a difference there, with the Gibson being the slightly heavier one. Before I take the strings off, I'll just comment on the action and the setup. This one is very good. The previous owner actually gigged with this a lot and used it in the studio for recording. It has been set up really, really well. It plays really nicely. There's absolutely no issues. I personally wouldn't change anything about this. You might get away with slightly lower action, but I think this is kind of at a sweet spot in terms of a Les Paul. Bridge and tailpiece. Tailpiece is stamped with advanced plating ink. I think it's just fairly standard for a Gibson. Obviously the posts on the Gibson are adjusted with these little wheels instead of the screw top. We know what this is going to be already. It's 24 3/4, just the same as the Westfield was. So the nut width, somewhere around the 42.5 mark. The Westfield was 44. The nut looks and feels like a unbleached bone nut. The cut is pretty good, but what I did notice when I took the strings off was the lightest 3 strings, the high strings, they actually get stuck in the nut slot. So there would be a lot of binding there in that nut, and I think we would benefit massively from recutting those slots and just widening them ever so slightly and then lubricating them. I didn't notice it when I was playing it, of course. However, just taking those off, they were proper stuck in there. I had to actually pull them to get them out, so that's definitely a flaw with this nut. So what you would expect on a Gibson, it is the brass nut that the Gibsons have on the top of their truss rods that you can adjust. So again, neck profile, I'm not really the one to be asking about it. I would say it's like a standard Gibson, whatever that means. It's like a U shape. It's not quite a Fender C, but it's not quite the old 50s style Gibsons where they were quite a fat neck on them. So yeah, do what you will with that information. Okay, so the frets on this one, they are wider than the Westfield, and they're definitely much taller than the Westfield. I personally like a jumbo fret, so I could have these wider again. If we look at the 1982 Gibson V that I just bought, the frets on it are quite wide. They're Virgin on jumbo frets, and personally, that's the kind of fret I like. Of course, we have the bound fingerboard with the fret nibs, and if you don't know what that is, that's just the fingerboard comes up over the end of the frets, just tidies it up. It's a little touch Gibson uses, not on all guitars, but they do use it on most. Of course, there's lots of yellowing on this binding. I don't know what these are like straight out of the factory, but I would imagine it was much more white or cream rather than this kind of, it's nearly going orange, but I like that. I think that looks good. Of course, the binding on the body as well, and on this one we have no binding on the headstock. Obviously this is now a 13-year-old guitar, so in its life it could have had any number of replacement parts, and these may not be original, but I think they are. They sounded pretty good and the seller seemed quite genuine. It's still always a little bit nervous when you do something like this on your more valuable guitars. They're actually dated as well. So the neck pickup is dated on the 14th of August and the bridge pickup's dated the 13th of August. They are definitely original pickups. And while we're in here, we'll have a look at the body construction. So you can see the main difference with this one versus the Westfield. Obviously there's no hollow top, but also you have this massive maple cap that goes onto the back, which is a mahogany. And you can see the join here inside the pickup cavity. And of course then that means that this top was actually carved rather than just bent over to form that, you know, top shape. Of course we have the Gibson branded pots here. They're big pots again, they're not stamped on the top here, but they're going to be 500k pots more than likely. I would imagine they say on the underside, if we were to take this out, it probably says on the plastic. You know, you can see straight away just looking at it, it's much tidier in here. It's all built on this kind of shielding plate that goes in the cavity, keeps it all together, and it screams better quality, it looks better. And I've always been a fan of Gibson's wiring. I think they're definitely one of the best. So it's the bridge is 7.8. The middle is 3.86 and the neck is 7.6. We need to talk about fingerboards, specifically on this 2012 model Gibson. Now this looks like a rosewood fingerboard. I believe they are rosewood. It's a very dark rosewood. It's really, really nice. There's kind of purple tints and everything in there. It's quite grimy, so when I clean it up and oil it, that'll show a bit more. If I was to remove this nut, and I'm not going to because it's glued in and I don't want to make a mess, knowing my luck I'll chip something out, but you would find hidden onto this nut that this is a laminated fretboard. So basically that means like a sandwich. So there's a cheaper piece of wood underneath this and then the nice rosewood is glued on top. Obviously with the binding, you'll never see that. So it looks like a rosewood fingerboard, but it's in fact two pieces glued together. For the Gibson fanboys out there, for some reason, this is a huge problem. I've had people comment on videos of this guitar saying that they literally wouldn't buy a 2012 model because of the laminated fingerboard, which I just find totally ridiculous. I think it's so stupid. My opinion on it, I couldn't give two shits. Rosewood is an endangered species. It's protected by various regulations like the CITES regulations. If you can get two or more fretboards out of one piece of rosewood by laminating it to something, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you not stretch the wood as far as it can go? You still get the beautiful rosewood fretboard, but oh no, there's a couple millimeters underneath, it's something else. Like, yeah, anyway, I'll not rant too much on it. Let me know what your opinion on that is, but I think it's one thing if Gibson were deceptively doing it and hiding it from customers and you know, not mentioning it and then charging, you know, the same price, then that's something different because they're, you know, manipulating their customers for more money, whatever. However, this is the second-hand market we're talking about, and people that put the comments are talking about the second-hand market. You know, if you feel that way, then, you know, brilliant. More 2012 Gibsons for me at cheaper prices, if that's the case. So, inlays, obviously this beautiful mother of pearl. As I said earlier, some of them are starting to yellow quite a lot, which I really like. That's the same as the binding. It's just weathering age of the guitar. It's 13 years old now. So you can see the main difference on the neck joint here versus the Westfield is there is a recessed tenon inside this part of the body. And this is a one-piece neck, whereas the Westfield had multiple pieces. The body in this one does look like one piece, but it's not. There is a join, as you can see here. This is a two-piece body. I believe some of them were made with one-piece bodies, but it is more rare. I'm of course happy to sacrifice the body for this beautiful top. Tuners are the classic style 2-screw Clouson tuners. Fairly normal for a Gibson like this. Alright, so that's pretty much all the same kind of points that we covered there. So let's talk about overall condition. So I scored the Westfield a modest 6 out of 10. And honestly, I probably score this the same. I think it's a 6 out of 10 as well. In terms of condition, Let me tell you why it's a 6 out of 10. It could actually score a little higher. First of all, there's a couple little things, you know, a couple of wee dings and scores in the fretboard. We have a load of marks on the top here, just kind of along the bottom. You only see them when the light hits it just right, but they're actually marks in the top finish. That being said, I can polish those out. I'm confident of that, so I will make them disappear. Again, that'll increase my rating on it, but, you know, plenty of wee scratches and scrapes, but nothing you wouldn't expect from a 13-year-old guitar that's actually been played. No real dings or chips out of the body. The body is in decent condition, couple little marks along here, but nothing really bad, nothing major. Obviously it needs a good clean as well. This is it exactly as I got it. The main point here is these two chips out of the neck. Now, as you can see, they're smaller than my fingernail. They are quite deep, so those chips definitely bring my condition rating down. The headstock's in pretty good condition. A couple of kind of lacquer marks along the corners, but no chips or dings. And the Gibson logo, which, you know, in a lot of the guitars with the inlaid logos, does crack around it. Seems pretty good. Again, could do with a clean. Frets definitely need a clean. They do need crowned as well, especially down the bottom here. There's quite a lot of string divots in it. Like I said, the nut, I would like to recut that on 3 of the strings. And then we've got our kind of general wear and tear here with the discoloring of the binding and the inlays, things like that there. But that being said, it's a 13-year-old guitar. It's pretty good. I think if we fix kind of the chip on the neck, we polish up the fretboard, do the frets, we polish the top up again, get those scores out of it, I think we're looking at a solid 8 out of 10 for this guitar. Yeah, maybe 8 out of 10. Not that that really matters, you know what I mean? Like, I'd happily play a 2 out of 10 condition-wise instrument if it plays well. You know, it's all about the setup. In my opinion, I don't care too much about the condition. And of course, lots of people feel the same. They like a road-worn guitar. Yeah, I need to work on my distorted tone a little bit, especially for these lower output pickups, but you get the idea. Hopefully I was able to include that whole demo. I've been having nightmares with copyright stuff, but yeah, we'll see. As you can hear, the Gibson is the far superior sounding guitar. I mean, at least in my opinion. You can let me know if you think any differently. Of course, we could do a hell of a lot with a decent pot upgrade and some pickup upgrades to this little Westfield to make it sound as good as that Gibson, and probably even better, especially if you put something like a bare knuckle pickup or Lawler, you know, something along those lines. I was going to just sell this guitar and get my money back on it, but if that's something you want to see, if you want me to go nuts on this and upgrade it and see if we can make it outplay the Gibson, let me know, and if there's enough interest, I'll maybe do that as a video. Of course, if I do that, I'll have to get rid of the neck pickup. Anyway, for that sound demo, I didn't adjust the presets for each guitar. I kept them exactly the same, and I kept the volume exactly the same, so you can hear the differences in the volume, you know, between the different pickups and whatnot. And hopefully my editing can put it together okay. I've never really done anything like this before. Like I said, it's not really about which one's better than the other. It's just about what you can get for your money, and the two main differences with these being very similar looking guitars. If you like the Gibson content, stick around, maybe consider subscribing. I have a lot more Gibson stuff coming soon, including a full restoration of this 1968 Gibson SG Junior, which is, you know, underway. And this amazing Gibson The V CMT, which again needs a restoration, not quite as in-depth as that SG, but equally as cool. Thanks for watching. See you next time.